Welcome everybody to this Committee of the Whole meeting of the Kalamazoo City Commission for Monday, October 17th, 2022. And the first order of business is a roll call by our good clerk, Borling.
Present.
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 Present. Present.
Here, may I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Vice Mayor Cooney. Supported by Commissioner Hess. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Thank you. Commissioner Juarez is excused. Communications, Manager Ritzma.
Nothing, Your Honor.
All right. Now is the opportunity for public comments for the Committee of the Whole meeting. Please keep in mind that there's also a public comment period during our regular business meeting that starts at 7 o'clock tonight. If there's anyone in the chambers that would like to make public comments, keep in mind you'll have 2 minutes at this meeting. Please state your name and whether you live in the city. And then we will also check to see if anybody has called in with a public comment after that. So please come forward if you have a public comment.
Hello, my name is Mitch. I live in the city. I just go anytime? All right. Hi, my name is Mitch. This is my fiance Jane and our son Ethan. We live in the Millwood neighborhood and we walk our son to and from his school, Millwood Elementary, Monday through Friday. In order to get to school, we cross Portage Street at Cork Street with the assistance of our steadfast crossing guard, Gloria. For those of you not familiar with the area, Cork and Portage Streets both lead to the freeway on and off ramps, and that's exactly how the drivers in this area operate their vehicles during school arrival and departure times, like they are getting on and off the freeway. My son and I have been nearly hit in the crosswalk by a right-turning follow-the-leader driver of an SUV, distracted by her phone and not looking up to see us until we were in her rearview mirror. We were both nearly hit by a cement truck that had failed to stop at the limit line before stopping in the crosswalk as we were finishing a crossing. I have seen multiple right and left turning vehicles drive between the crossing guard and the children. We have also noticed that despite waiting our turn, we never actually get the right of way, whether we push the pedestrian button to activate the walk light or not. The vehicles on Cork Street are also given a green light at the exact same time. This is causing most of these very close calls, including yet another one this morning. We believe much of this situation can be mitigated by simply giving the pedestrian the right-of-way. This could be accomplished by using the existing pedestrian button in combination with the traffic system to keep the lights red when the button is pushed, instead of having to go at the same time as the cars. This would eliminate conflict and improve the safety of the crossings by allowing vehicles and pedestrians to each have their own turn. This morning, in fact, there was an officer in the area giving out speeding tickets on Lover's Lane. He said there's a missing speed sign, and he cannot enforce the speed limit there until the sign has been added. Our issue is at the corner of Cork and Portage Street, though, so I flagged him down to let him know that as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Is there anyone else in the chambers this evening that wants to take advantage of this public comment period? See no one. DCM Chamberlain, has anybody called in with a public comment?
We'll go ahead and check, and just as a reminder, people can call 888-382-9556. Caller ending in 0468, go ahead, you're with the City Commission.
Hi, y'all. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead, you're with the Kalamazoo City Commission.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Rachel Frazier, and my son is a first grader, or I'm sorry, he's second grader this time. And I am just calling the same regards. I have my son who is he's just turning 8 this year. We've been crossing the street from Foley Street across Lover's Lane. And with these cars constantly driving so incredibly quick, It is super unsafe for him to cross by himself, so I refuse for him to do so, and I then go with him. I also have a very young child. She's a 3-month-old baby that I have in a stroller with me. Sometimes I do carry her in my arms. We have been very closely standoff, I guess you could say, of all these cars flying through. The cross guard, he came in about mid-school year last year, and I believe he did this on his own goodwill. I do thank heavens for him because I think that a lot has kind of slowed down with him, but there are some cars that do not have any regard for him. He's in a bright green suit, head to toe, with a stop sign and a flashlight. He has complete disregard for the drivers have complete disregard for this crosswalk. Even though we do have signs, some of them have been hit, run over, and very rarely have been put back. There is one of these missing, and that is on Lovers Lane at the crosswalk of, Lovers Lane and Foley Street. One of them is missing on the right-hand facing of the road and has not been put back for, I would say, probably about 3 weeks now. And with this being super, super dangerous, these cars are flying through. There are multiple kids of the same age range, and like I said earlier, I refuse for my son to cross by himself. I believe it is
That was the last caller.
Thank you very much, DCM Chamberlain. Just as a note to, first of all, for those who have provided some comments tonight, is that I have notes that are taken on those comments, and I see those addresses are being written down, so there certainly will be some follow-up on that. I really appreciate everyone who's brought those issues to our attention. And in general, just thank you for taking time and making the effort to come down and provide comments here for this Committee of the Whole meeting. Next on our agenda is our work session. Manager Risma.
Thank you, Mayor. The gentleman that spoke, if you could sign in at the book over there so we get your contact information, we'll have someone follow up. Thank you. We've got a couple of items on our work session agenda tonight. This is the last in a series of presentations on the Foundation for Excellence and its 5th anniversary. So we have our presentation tonight is on infrastructure in neighborhoods, and our Assistant Director of Public Works, Anthony Ladd, will be presenting on this part of the presentation. Mr. Ladd?
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Commission. My name is Anthony Ladd. I'm the Public Works Director, Public Works Division Manager for the Public Services Department. And with me tonight to talk about 2 of these great FFE-funded programs is George Waring. He is a Senior Civil Engineer in our Public Works Division as well. So as mentioned, we're here to talk about 2 of our, longest standing FFE-funded programs, traffic calming and sidewalks. This is their 3rd year, and it has been a great, successful year. Every year we are adding more. We're learning more about things that we can do for these programs. So we're really excited to be here tonight to talk about that, as well as, after this presentation, give a brief update on the Kalamazoo Avenue 2-way conversion as well. So a brief program overview of when we call traffic calming for FFE, when we put that line item in there, what that means for this program is basically we're calming traffic by right-sizing travel lanes, adding calming features, and reducing that is either to reduce speeds, create a more pedestrian and bicyclist safe environment, or generally just to get driver behavior in a predictable, safe manner traveling through city streets. This year alone, we were able to perform traffic calming measures on 20.4 lane miles, and while at the same time additionally adding 10 miles of new bike facilities. We'll talk about this in a minute, but a big part of this is also speed and study travel analysis. A lot of the things that we implement are tested throughout the country. We want to test that out for ourselves while we have these measures that we think will work. We are doing pre and post installation analysis to see if these effects are actually taking place and having something tangible to measure. And what we've seen through different installations of traffic calming, we're seeing a reduction in 2 to 5 miles per hour on average for these streets. Again, this can take place in many ways, shape, and form when we use these funds for various projects within this program. A few that you've seen are speed humps, many roundabouts, which were most recently installed in the Winchell neighborhood with plans to look at a pilot next year in the Weston Hill neighborhood as well. Certainly lane narrowing is taking effect in most or all of our current road overlay projects. Chicanes that we have done in years past, bump outs, delineators, and speed radar signs that have been there since the first year of this program, but we continue to move those in strategic ways. A big part of these traffic calming measures as well that's not necessarily included in this program are road diets that we've seen on Cork Street, on Parkview, and next year for Howard Street. So that's a brief overview of our traffic calming program in particular. We would like to highlight one traffic calming project this year, and probably the most visible one that you've seen, which was Park and Westnedge. Park and Westnedge are some of the widest roads that we have in Kalamazoo, previous state trunk line that was taken over by the city in 2019. You have wide travel lanes, high-speed vehicles, and limited pedestrian and bike facilities for users. Also with a problem and an opportunity that existed for these streets, knowing that they would not be going to two-way configuration anytime in the near future as we perform this work on Kalamazoo and Michigan Avenue. We saw an opportunity to take advantage of these problems and create them into opportunities to create pedestrian facilities, bike facilities, reduce the distances that pedestrians have to travel across Park and Westnedge, which was a huge problem that was voiced to us by residents all along Park and Westnedge Avenue. The impacts of this work and the people that were impacted most before this work were residents living directly on both sides of Park and Westnedge, those in the north side neighborhood, and those traveling by either car, bike, or foot, and people trying to get to downtown as well. So to perform this particular project involved several steps, least of which the complexity of Park and Westnedge and the high speeds and the traffic volumes posed a huge challenge. So for this, we had to do a little bit more work than we would for a typical traffic calming project, which started with the removal of pavement markings, followed by a fog seal to really show contrast of these traffic patterns that we were going to create. This was not, these were changes that were going to be made, so we had to create essentially a new road surface for drivers to get acclimated to. From that point, we added new pavement markings, delineators, and added 2.6 miles of bike lanes on Park and Westnedge with the addition of on-street parking. In order to fully understand what was included, what needed to be included in this project, there was a great deal of engagement before, during, and after this project was implemented through online surveys, meetings with residents, multiple meetings with residents, and direct mailers, notifying residents that the work was coming and also providing that survey information online. Engagement was continued through the project and we've also since put out surveys to capture that information. Not only was this voiced as an important project to residents of the Northside neighborhood and those that are affected by Park and Westnedge in general, we also relied on our goals from Imagine Kalamazoo, Connected City and Complete Neighborhoods, looking at Northside neighborhood plans where these types of actions have been requested for some time. This work was also in line with our new street design guide and our complete streets policy. So what will success look like for this project in particular? Obviously, speed reduction. We'll be studying crash analysis, looking at police reports to understand if crashes overall have reduced or if they have changed in pattern, looking for trends in that information. We intend to monitor that, make adjustments as necessary, not only through this initial season of implementation, but through the winter seasons as well that we'll talk about. Again, this is something that's being studied. You know, your driver behaviors change throughout the year, and also through construction season, there's a wide variety of speeds that we've seen. Our initial analysis is somewhere between, I'd say, 4 and 5 mile per hour reduction in speeds, and we are actively looking at crash data now to understand, to collect that sample size to see if we've seen a decrease in accidents overall. Future challenges with this, as mentioned, we intend this to be a pilot that continues through the winter, not only to test our ability to understand the needs of drivers and driver behavior in the wintertime and how that varies through the seasons, but also to work with our crews in-house and to pilot our ability to maintain those roads in the wintertime, your street sweeping operations, your snow removal. You know, we're working with crews through this to understand what traffic calming implementations are going to work for the city of Kalamazoo. And I will let George talk about Sidewalk.
Great. Thank you. So this is now my third year involvement with this project. This is my second year running our sidewalk project for the FFE, so I'm excited to give you an update on how that's been going. So just summary of the projects: to repair sidewalk or to add new sidewalking gaps that are in the network. So as you can imagine, if you've walked around the city of Kalamazoo, you know how many different areas that there are. So just by the numbers this year so far, we've repaired 2.4 miles of sidewalk. This connects a network of 7.06 miles of sidewalk, and we've added just over 1,300 feet of new sidewalk in that as gap fillers. Throughout the time we've been doing it, we try to identify network gaps that are key to connecting areas or neighborhoods together and then filling those. So we did a couple last year. This year we were able to get to 2 main gaps, and those were on Park Street and on Lulu. So Park Street had about a 300-foot gap on both sides of the roadway from north of Lulu before you get to Hopkins. There is sidewalk on Hopkins that wasn't connected, and so we were trying to fill that gap so residents and people attending businesses could go up and down Park and Westnedge with access east and west as well. So who is impacted by that? For the residents up there, it's really a larger area than the people just on the street. That's a pretty common conversation I have with residents, is that sometimes when I'm putting a sidewalk in or repairing it in front of their front door, sometimes I get the question of, why are you doing this here? And really it's because we're trying to connect people further than just on that street. So it did impact 20 estimated households in that particular area, but really the impact was much larger than that, really to incorporate that whole neighborhood and get them connected together from a pedestrian standpoint. So the action that we did is we installed 5-foot sidewalks, which is the current standard. So we have many 4-foot sidewalks around the city. Whenever we put in something new or replace a whole block of sidewalk, we try to put it back in as wider, really going as wide as we can. 5 foot is standard for us, and that's what we're putting in. Why we did that was because of a lot of the outreach and participation with the neighborhood, and community planning did a great job of trying to identify these spots for us and help us understand where pedestrians were crossing, what their needs were from a pedestrian standpoint, and help us identify these kind of key areas. So these two areas actually came directly from planning, which was a big help for us on the engineering side to kind of key on a specific area. Like I said, they held multiple engagement meetings on topics like this to include, it was included with a lot of the West Engine Park traffic calming. And then we're still engaging folks to understand where the need is for pedestrians to move, to access grocery stores, to access businesses and things like that. Here's just a quick picture of that sidewalk actually in place. And really the goal behind it was, like I've pointed out, is a connected city, a connected neighborhood, and making sure people can get to each other. Specifically, if they can't be in a car or they can't ride a bike, you know, you want to give people options of ways they can get to each other and get to the places that they need to go. Whenever we're looking at these, we like to look through the neighborhood plan. Actually, a task I had our interns go through, kind of comb through each neighborhood plan we've received so far. This one directly came from the Northside Neighborhood Plan, as well as the street design outreach. And we were looking at our complete streets policy and our streets design manual, looking at all of those different things. So what success looks like for us is that it's actually installed. So that's good news, is right now it's out there, it's in place. From the few residents I've talked to, they're happy with it. Had a few minor complaints on the restoration we kind of had to address with the contractor and with the residents to make that work. And how will we know if we succeed? Really, is this route used by residents to access the places they want to go? And are they happy with it? Is there a feeling of safety and comfort from being off the road, not having to access the roadway or walk in the grass adjacent to the roadway? And as you can see, this particular project was relatively inexpensive in terms of our project as a whole. You know, we were talking for this section, this is average pricing. This was a part of $1 million contract, and so I had to break out just this specific part. It was less than $20,000 to really fill this gap. And so that's a lot of what I'm trying to look for when we're in these projects doing the sidewalk. Is there a small section we can just fill that will make a big impact to the neighborhood? And so we're trying to find those spots and get those filled. Next year, we've requested from the FFE an additional $500,000 to proceed forward with filling more network gaps. We have some larger ones that really do need to be taken care of in some pretty key neighborhoods that we're trying to fill. And so we hope to keep expanding the network while we continue to repair the network. So we don't want to take anything away from our repair side, and that's why we made that additional special request to FFE. Future challenges. There's been, I know, multiple conversations on different levels about winter maintenance and snow clearing of the sidewalk. And so I know that's something the city is actively addressing, but as well as future maintenance needs, we always have that. And the other one with residents is sometimes they don't wish to have the sidewalk adjacent to their property. And so we often have that challenge where we have to work through the community relations and really doing some education and outreach to help them understand it's more than just their property. We're not after just their property. We're really wanting to see the city connected on a multi-level. But some opportunities there, like I often tell residents, is really bringing people together, connecting the community, providing access to places that are safe for people to walk through. They don't have to get in the road. Somebody in a wheelchair can easily access where they need to go. A lot of those things I try to explain are really important and a great reason why we have this program. And that concludes the sidewalk portion.
Yep. At this point, we were going to open it up for question or discussion before we give our update for Kalamazoo Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Ladd and Mr. Warren. I appreciate it very much. Questions from the commission? Commissioner Decker.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you guys for that information regarding the expansion and the upgrades to the sidewalks. I am wondering, because I just learned this myself, can you Can you talk about exactly what a road diet is for the community?
Absolutely. So a road diet would be essentially a narrowing of lanes, typically going from 4 lanes to 3 is its most common configuration. We have several of those that we've done already and several good potential candidates, such on Howard Street, where when you go from that 4-lane to 3-lane configuration, you're not moving curb lanes, but you're taking, I would say, full advantage of that road width from curb to curb that you have. A lot of times the vehicular capacity going from 4 lanes to 3 is not a huge drop-off, mainly because you are giving a dedicated turn lane where I'm sure you've been in traffic and somebody turns from the, one of the travel lanes and you have to stop and wait, whereas if somebody wants to turn, they get into that 3rd lane now. So your travel efficiencies are a lot more smooth. And with that, there is a reduction in the most dangerous types of crashes where you don't have those movements head on or rear ends, is now it's more angled to where people are getting over and making that dedicated turn movement. A lot of times too, with that adequate road space that you've been given, it provides the opportunity for bike lanes too.
Thank you. And so with the changes, again, with some of the lanes that are happening within the city, and I know we go out and we talk to the neighborhoods and we talk to the businesses, what type of education are you guys doing to let, again, hey, this is what's happening, this is now how you travel these roads?
So every road seems to kind of have it, no 2 projects are exactly the same. So when we have these opportunities to talk on an annual basis about generically what a road diet is or what a mini roundabout or chicane can look like in theory, at the same time, ahead of those projects, we are going to those neighborhoods and surrounding areas ahead of those projects within that same construction year to explain, meet with residents, have one-on-one conversations, follow-up email and conversation to explain or make people feel as comfortable as possible about what we're planning on bringing to the community.
Thank you. So that's more of like the neighborhood that it's really affecting. I'm talking about the whole community as a whole.
Sure.
I guess I'm just asking for more, so if a resident in the community wants to know, hey, how do I drive down this road, what's happening, can you talk about where they can go to find that information?
So a lot of our information, or every project that we do has a project page on the city's website that is accessible. We have a lot of our survey data information is there, any kind of detour route during construction, planned project timeframes, what's going to be in it, who they can contact directly for more information is available online. There is a good bit of social media outreach that happens throughout the year. Again, kind of speaking more generically about what these features are, and then as those features are being implemented in specific areas, there's a lot of social media outreach for that as well. And then outreach on social media about all of the public meetings that are available for anyone to attend for a face-to-face conversation or more interaction that way.
Thank you. So with I saw that you guys are going to be asking for definitely an increase in funding for the FFE to complete some of the projects for next year. How many miles or updates, how many miles do you think you'll be able to maybe accomplish with those funds?
With the replacement funds?
Yeah, yes.
We know offhand. Go ahead, George.
Yeah. So for the new sidewalk, where the 500,000 increase, when new sidewalks are typically more expensive than to repair existing. So we're looking at approximately anywhere between a half mile to a mile of new sidewalk. It just will depend on bid pricing for next year, so we're subject to the market in that front. And then for the repairs, we're averaging between 2 to 4 miles of sidewalk repaired and replaced each year, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I'm going to say that's kind of what we've seen historically. repaired funds, we've been able to, connect 7 to 10 miles of sidewalk a year, make that full connection. With this repair or replacement, new build, new construction, I would put that on more of a 1 to 2 miles for every $500,000.
Okay. Do you have any idea, have you guys thought about where these new miles will be? Do we have any neighborhoods on the plan?
Yeah, so we have a couple different ones in some places. One of them actually came from request, I believe it came to the commission from Western students over on Fraternity Village Drive, thank you. So we have some plans drawn up for them in the preliminary version for that. And there's also some down in the Millwood, West Ninch Hill area. So there's a couple different spots that we've had requests on and are looking to add. How we do that is we also run it through our prioritization list, where we also look at these gap areas and try to see fit it against the connected city and those different things and kind of prioritize out where that goes.
Okay. I'm kind of, going back to, the two comments that we had today, and I'm pretty sure it's a problem, or not a problem, but, a concern for all families, especially with little children. Have we taken into consideration any of the traffic calming and sidewalk areas specifically around our schools?
So for traffic calming and sidewalk projects, both, what we do is we have a quarter-mile radius around your high pedestrian, either your highest pedestrian areas or your most vulnerable populations. Schools certainly being a high target area for sidewalk repairs and traffic calming both.
Have we identified any schools or any areas within that might fall into this realm of the replacing and repair and upgrading?
The repairs, I think almost all of the locations fell within those quarter-mile areas this year, and it just kind of speaks to the need that exists. When you have a couple 100 miles worth of sidewalk, there's a lot that could be focused there, and that's where we started, working with community planning and economic development to identify those target areas. Also, a lot of the walkability studies that have been done and interactions with neighborhoods and school leadership, we rely on that feedback as well to show us or tell us where those problem areas are for them specifically.
Okay. So we could possibly, again, have some of the schools reach out and be like, hey, this is a very big issue. Can you come take a look, talk about the traffic calming within certain areas where a lot of the community will walk their kids to and from, not even just their kids, but just anyone, like you're saying, to and from school. So that could be something that we would be able to work with the schools on and say, hey, have you had parents say that there's a particular area that might need some traffic calming within their area?
Absolutely. And there are a lot of requests that are made that come into the city through various either social media or 311 requests. However, those are all tracked and logged so that when those projects go to get built for consideration, we review that and we see how many locations have been mentioned, if there's a pattern or trend there. Something that George made reference to that we're working to build and understand is, that needs to have its voice, have its place in this project selection process. Not only for sidewalk, but also our road projects. There's a lot of different stakeholders that have interest in these projects, and trying to identify with the funding that we have, how can we best implement those dollars where they're going to be most needed and have the biggest effect.
And so when you say stakeholders, you mean like businesses and?
Stakeholders being
Community.
Residents, businesses, tourists, city services, everyone here within the city limit.
Well, I will just say that I have been around and walked on some of those new and sidewalks. So thank you. They're definitely nice to see. They're ADA accessible. Individuals are able to use them. So I appreciate your work on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Decker. Other questions? Commissioner Hess.
Yes. I'd like to thank you, Anthony and George, for that presentation. It was wonderful. Here we're talking about changing people's minds about how they actually drive through our city and are able to walk through our city. Having been passed by 2 cars going 60 on Mount Olivet Road, I'd love to change some of those minds. I have heard from several citizens about actually using our KDPS to work with speeding in our city, but that's being reactive. What you're doing is proactive, and I appreciate that, because that's going to be the ultimate solution, rather than trying to catch someone when they're going 60 miles an hour on a city street. One of the questions that I had, and I think you just answered it, was for our citizens who have areas of sidewalk, and I've heard from several areas of sidewalk, and you said call 311 or other areas. How can our citizens report areas of sidewalk that need repair?
Our preference would be to have them go through 311. We've had a pretty good success rate of logging that information. It also allows us to determine whether or not it may be an emergency situation. It may be some sort of undermining a failed utility. There could be some sort of underlying cause that allows us to send that to the right person, whether it's an immediate need or something that can be planned for later.
Okay, thank you. And understanding that the planning of these projects isn't immediate, that it takes a while, that we need the neighborhood plans, we need neighborhoods to work on their plans, and that you are also accessing those plans to determine your next year and 2 and 5 years out of work.
Commissioner Pradel.
Thanks, you guys, for the presentation. It's amazing how much you guys have accomplished in just one, we'll call it season, if you will. I remember Director Baker, when I met with him a few months ago, had mentioned that something like 104 projects went on this season, which is truly remarkable. So thank you guys for all your work that you're doing to make our community safer and more connected. I was going to ask you, so when you look at like the Winchell neighborhood area, with the roundabout concepts or the traffic calming initiatives on Winchell and some of the outlining streets, it makes sense because they had a very robust neighborhood planning process, and there's an understanding of that. But like, let's say for instance, Millwood, that doesn't have a neighborhood plan yet, but clearly you might have some safety needs. How do you prioritize and figure out, okay, well, this neighborhood has a neighborhood plan. Yeah, we have what we want to accomplish here, but there might be a neighborhood that's massive in size like Millwood where there's clear needs. How do you balance those or prioritize that?
I would say for both of these projects, as we develop them, this is the 3rd year, we learned something else about them and what works for the city, what needs to be changed. The need has far outweighed the funding that existed. So going into this and needing to start somewhere, relying on those neighborhood plans and knowing that existed, kind of been vetted through the community. And knew this was something that would have support, was a good place to start. However, that would not limit where we introduce these traffic calming measures just because there's not a neighborhood plan. If there's a need, obviously through the same channels of 3 individual request helps. Obviously, we know when there are more than one request coming from one individual, that can speak loudly for that area. But having that information is only one part of it. We want to go out there and verify ourselves that there's a geometry issue, that there's something that we can do at this intersection that'll improve the behavior that we've seen. We're getting increasingly comfortable with these tools in our tool belt, so that allows us to properly address each issue as we encounter it. So having that information, going out there and verifying that this road could benefit from traffic calming or some sort of measure that we can do is how we would handle that and get that programmed into these projects.
I was just going to make a comment as well. When you were doing the Cork Street project, as you remember, the corner of Cork and I think it's Lovers Lane and Cork and Portage, there's a lot of community and resident frustration, we'll say, and they verbalized that very strongly. I couldn't go out for a walk, 3 children without having somebody stop me and share their thoughts about that. But the thing I was going to share is I think it's remarkable, and it speaks volumes to the work that you do, that you kind of saw this evolution that happened as that feedback came. First, there were big diamond signs that had flags on them as you came up to it to let you know about the change, and then now there's actually like flashing arrows as you get up to it that are solar powered that warn people, hey, this lane is about to end. It's right turn only. So I just wanted to also just thank you for being responsive in those situations as well. And similarly, I remember what was the conversations with the chicanes and on the north side, and feedback from residents with that as that was happening. So I really think that you've done a tremendous job of adapting and pivoting and taking that resident feedback. So I just wanted to make sure to share that as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Pradel. Other questions or comments? Seeing none at this point, just a couple from me. So I really appreciate your recognition of the fact that, we have Public Works that takes care of all our streets, including plowing. And then we also have public safety that gets through our streets with big, long trucks and those sorts of things. So I had received a couple of concerns from neighborhood residents about reducing the width of the lane and what does that mean for that sort of thing. Do you want to talk about that just a little bit?
Absolutely. Again, when we take into account the amount of need that exists for these implementations citywide, with the finite amount of funding that we have, it allows us to implement a lot of quick win and pilot type projects. I think what the neighborhoods and the community has seen is these are iterative pilot projects where we are taking and features that have worked around the country, bringing them to Kalamazoo, and really trying to take a learning approach to them, where we are making adjustments as needed to understand what certain vehicular size trucks are going to need, what residents are requesting, and how we keep people safe. And as we are designing these implementations, looking at them through the computer to make sure that these turning movements are going to work. As we iterate through these steps, we're talking with public safety to understand what their apparatuses are going to need, and trying to, understand that road narrowing does not, sound like the best idea for large vehicles, and we acknowledge that. But what we're seeing on the roads are paint or rubber curb that can be rolled over that are safe for vehicles to mount, essentially. So trying to take that approach where we want to go out and try these projects that have been proven elsewhere with our best understanding of what this area needs, of what a certain intersection would benefit from, but also being open-minded, listening to residents, working with public safety, working with school buses or with Metro to iterate through that, to find that, thread that needle, that something that's going to work for everyone.
I appreciate that. Quite a lot of pieces to this challenge. Commissioner Hess.
I have one more short question. So understanding that, again, like I said, this involves changing a mind where we're working with traffic and traffic calming. What are the best ways within our city and with all of the employees and departments of this city? Can we educate our residents and those who visit, what are the best ways to educate people besides us sitting up here and screaming, and you putting it on social media and you know, everybody doing one little thing, but what is there a conscious campaign in force to really talk about and work on traffic calming?
I think one of the biggest things that we can do is to just keep talking about it, honestly. The frequency in which we're having these conversations, sharing social media posts as we put out information. I think one of the things that we did do a lot of work this year. I think next year we want to work on our communication and how we message that, and just really, you know, as we're growing and gaining confidence in these programs, we'll be able to focus more on that communication piece, relying on, you know, the tremendous coworkers that we have here at the city to help spread that message. But just as a community, having that conversation more often, and I think that education piece is huge. It's one of three legs between engineering and so just continuing those conversations and having them frequently.
Thank you.
Commissioner Praedel.
Sorry, I know this is not FFE related, but I've been wondering about this, and I'm sure the public maybe has as well. On the corner, the corner of, I think it's Westnedge and South, is it? Where those enhancements were done to traffic, the traffic signals and the curb and everything. Have you seen a reduction in crashes and issues on the intersection? I know I'm catching it on the spot here, but I had somebody recently ask me that, and I mean, it's definitely very bold that you see a big change on the intersection, but I just wondered if you've noticed a difference.
So there was quite a history of accidents at that intersection, as you mentioned. We had put together a traffic signal improvement project that included moving the traffic signal heads, tree trimming, making the signals more visible to the public, more built up. I think from our preliminary data, since installation, I don't want to say, but I don't think we've had any accidents there.
Wow.
Since that project.
And then again, I know that was another example of where, you know, community and stakeholders and neighborhood groups, whatever, really advocated for that intersection, and it definitely seems to have paid off, so.
It
yeah.
was great.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Commissioner Decker.
Thank you, Mayor. Not more of a question, but just a comment. I do want to thank you for talking about who's going to be, again, taking care of, say, the new parking lanes and the bike lanes, because that also was a question that I had from a resident. You know, this is now in front of my house. Who's going to take care of this? Who's going to, you know, move the snow? So I thank you for reiterating that, you know, that it will be the city that will be taking care of that. Thanks.
Any other questions on this portion of our presentation? All right, seeing none at this point, hey, just a reminder, something I always think about is that a very few years ago, I mean, we're recognizing the 5th anniversary of the Foundation for Excellence, we literally had a sidewalk budget with $0 in it. We were not doing any sidewalk work in the city of Kalamazoo, outside of perhaps some horribly damaged spot. It was not happening. So it's just very interesting that we're having this discussion now about all the work that's going on. And I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Manager Isma.
Do you want to continue on to two-way street update?
Christina?
Okay, so let's jump into that part of this presentation.
Okay. Good evening again, everyone. Just real quick, want to take this opportunity to give an update on the Kalamazoo Avenue two-way conversion. Again, this was a project that began in the spring of this year. That was one of the early trunk line projects that we have programmed under our Connected City vision for all of these streets downtown, and what we're mostly previous state trunk lines. Our Stadium Drive project completed this year, and we will be moving on to Kalamazoo Avenue with ongoing work on Park and Westnedge bike lanes, as we mentioned, and then moving to Michigan Avenue roughly in 2026, about the time that Kalamazoo Avenue is completed. Again, our limits for this project will be from West Main up to Douglas, going east to Harrison. And it will be as much of a utility project as it is a road project, which we hope to do for all of our projects, really looking at our aging infrastructure, its current condition, what the future use is going to be as downtown continues to develop and land use changes. So we're able to take the time to look at our stormwater utility, our drinking water, as we improve our road surface and create enhanced mobility.
So here's the timeline of the project. This summer, we did quite a bit of engagement. And that engagement followed up on stuff that, on the engagement process that we did in 2019 prior to the pandemic, which kind of set the course for these Streets for All projects. And so this summer, we've had our consultants study that underground utility work to understand what needs to happen. We did the outreach and we began design work. And so now we're in the second phase, where we are confirming what we heard, going back out to our stakeholders, going back out to our community with what we heard, how that impacts the roadway design, and we'll talk about that in just a second, how that things have. Design work has started in environmental studies. We are still on track to have plans released to the public this spring for that first check, and then for the project to be bid at the end of next year in order for construction to start the following year. Remind you that it is a 2-year construction project, so 24 and 25, and our consultants will help us understand what that phasing should look like. So we spent about 6 weeks doing outreach, and I want to kind of touch base on this. This work could not have happened without the Foundation for Excellence. Mayor, you mentioned 5 years. Today, to the date, is actually the 55th birthday of the master plan. All of that work and that visioning has led to where we are today. So we did a variety of outreach events. We really spent some time using our public participation policy to understand who those stakeholders were and who is impacted by this project. So looking at what are the adjacent neighborhoods and institutions, thinking about those that live and work in those areas, and of course those who play. We are dealing with downtown. So a lot of people come into downtown who don't necessarily live or work there but come for events. So we were at Art Hop, in August. We did all the lunchtime lives in August. We did meetings in Douglas for Stewart, Douglas, and West Main Hill. We spent an evening at Arcadia Festival site along the trail catching people. And we attended National Night Out in August in the Northside neighborhood talking about this project. And we had, in terms of numbers, and we had an online survey that paralleled everything. And we did about 15 small group, either one-on-one or small group stakeholder meetings for those that own property along the corridor, particularly in the downtown, and other large landowners in downtown to discuss impacts and timeline of the project. Without those small group meetings, it was approximately 400 touch points across all of those activities, including nearly 200 survey respondents for the online survey. And we heard a lot of things. We were able to give people a variety of different ways to give us their feedback. I talked about an online survey where you could drop a pin on the intersection that you were most concerned about for us to look at for pedestrian crossings. You were also able to give us comments. I want on-street parking. I moved through this area, it doesn't feel safe, or I don't think the street should be two-way. I think they should stay one-way, right? So we got a variety of comments back in. We had little art projects at Art Hop for people to give us their feedback, and we collected a lot of notes at the business forum, which I failed to mention on the previous slide, where we invited downtown businesses to come in and hear about the project, give us their concerns and questions for not only the design, but also what impacts construction would have on downtown. So what did we hear? This is a little small. I'm happy to provide you all with a larger copy, and all of this will be online in the next couple of weeks on the Imagine Kalamazoo project page. What we did is we asked people to talk to us about what intersections were most important for us to be looking at for that north-south crossing. And, you know, whether it was in person and people put a sticker on the map, or it was online where they dropped a pin, these were the top intersections in the Stewart neighborhood and the downtown. And not a huge surprise. I mean, I think a lot of them rose to the top in the downtown that we expected them to. West Edge and Kalamazoo and Michigan being a big one. And then at the east end, where we look at Pitcher and Porter, and those are flipped underneath, so I apologize for that. But you know, the east end, where there's quite a bit of entertainment, where people are moving across Kalamazoo Avenue between Water Street, Bell's, Hot Cat, and in that area. So I'm going to turn it over to Anthony to talk a little bit about what that has meant, what this feedback has meant as it relates to our road design. And again, in addition to, you know, the intersections that were important to folks, we also heard that on-street parking was critical on Kalamazoo Avenue. We heard that we wanted really wide sidewalks, and we had to, you know, in planning a fixed street where we have buildings and we're dealing with space that is, you know, given to us rather than unlimited quantity. We've had to make some decisions, and Anthony's going to talk about some of those choices now.
So as Christina mentioned, there is a finite amount of roadway space and an amenity space here on Kalamazoo Avenue, as there is for all of our streets. But it was a particularly interesting challenge working through this from a design aspect, but also engaging with neighborhoods and businesses downtown in the area to see what's most valued. I think that, you know, while we are trying to get a street that is going to function for vehicles and move that capacity that exists between Kalamazoo Avenue and Michigan, we also acknowledge, you know, one of the biggest reasons for doing this is to create a space downtown that people want to come to for recreation, for business, and that encourages pedestrian activity of all types. So as we set out to do this, this is the existing cross-section for most of Kalamazoo Avenue up to West Edge, where we saw 3 travel lanes, 11 feet wide, with, you know, essentially parking on both sides of the street there. And after working through design iterations and performing that neighborhood engagement, the configuration that seemed to accomplish those goals the most was to have what we call an uneven lane balance, where essentially you will see 2 travel lanes in the west direction with a center turn lane and 1 lane headed towards the eastbound movement. This allows you to maintain parking on the south side of the road, as well as provide wide pedestrian sidewalk access for users. A couple of things with this uneven configuration: we get the opportunity to take advantage of Michigan Avenue working in tandem, whereas, you know, essentially anything that we do on Kalamazoo Avenue will affect on Michigan. So we can expect something similar to this, where this is uneven on Kalamazoo Avenue, will also be uneven for Michigan. This will allow us to move the capacity of vehicles that we anticipate currently and in the future, and we are performing additional traffic studies to you know, make sure that for future traffic volumes that this alignment will work as we move forward in the design process, and we should have more information on that in the springtime. It's another great point. As we move through both of these projects of Kalamazoo and Michigan Avenue, in a pretty pivotal time for downtown where there's new development happening all the time, one of the things that we wanted to maintain was the flexibility that not moving those curb lines provided By working in our existing curb space, this allows us flexibility for the future. Should new development happen, should traffic patterns change in a way that makes us need to react to that, by not moving those curb lines or moving them in the future only once instead of twice or 3 times, this configuration will allow for that traffic movement and allow for flexibility for future development based on what these road impacts are and what happens downtown. And then we will end. We have 2 more illustrations of some of the design work that has happened up to this point. The north-south road there, or what it's oriented north-south, is actually West Main, running west to east as it intersects with Douglas and Kalamazoo on the right-hand side there. And this is another close-up of Douglas and West Main here, and you can see the alignment that's vastly improved from its current configuration, allows for pedestrian movements and a 90-degree approach angle for traffic. And I believe that is it.
Thank you very much. Any specific questions about this at this point from Commission? Commissioner Decker? Okay. Trying to read your mind there, I guess.
David, just a comment. I know that in the Kalamazoo College Plan, which we're going to be looking at in the business meeting, that intersection at Douglas and West Main is paramount. It has been for decades for the Kalamazoo College students crossing back and forth into the neighborhood. So thank you. I really hope that comes to fruition sooner rather than later.
Thanks so much again. Appreciate it. And we have another presentation, right, Manager Ritzma?
We do. Our Foundation for Excellence manager, Mr. Steve Brown, is going to present the 2023 draft budget. On the agenda, it says 2022, but that should be 2023. So, Mr. Brown?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor Cooney, Commissioners, City Manager Ritzma. Thank you for having me this evening. I'm Steve Brown. I'm the Foundations for Excellence Manager with the City of Kalamazoo. And I'm here this evening to, as it were, celebrate the 5th anniversary and lift it up. This microphone goes in and out, by the way, so I apologize if people at home can't hear me, but I'll do my best. And also to present the 6th annual draft FFE city budget for yourselves and the public. What I want to do really quickly is thank every one of my colleagues who came before me this fall to share the work they're doing on this 5th anniversary. So just a brief list here is SPK Coordinator Kevin Ford, Neighborhood Business Coordinator Melody Dakin, Community Planning Economic Development Director Antonio Mitchell, Parks and Rec Director Patrick McVeary, Division Manager Anthony Ladd, City Planner Christina Anderson, and their teams. Thank you very much for showing the work that you're doing that FFE has made possible, and that the involvement of our whole community has also helped make possible through the Imagine Kalamazoo plan. So what I'm going to do this evening is actually present directly from the FFE website, and this is kind of a double bottom line for us, that we can show the community that all of the information I'm presenting is available to them at any time, at home, on a smartphone, anywhere they can get the internet, and it also just helps us reinforce that transparency piece for the community. So you'll see here the landing page of the website, and just a quick orientation. You can click through to meetings and events, so you can see all of our Open Meetings Act public meetings. You can see a document library, which I'll come back to later, and this has our annual reports, all of our articles and bylaws, all of our draft budgets, annual reports, newsletters, right on down the line. So it's really a treasure trove of information, and also connects you with the current roster of our board of directors, several of whom are here this evening: City Commissioner Hoffman, City Commissioner Hess, Mayor Anderson, of course, and City Manager Ritzma. So brief history of the FFE, which is relevant to tonight, is that it was founded in 2017, and it's really with the explicit purpose of lowering the taxes for all city taxpayers from 19.0125 mils down to 12 mils, stabilizing the city's budget, and providing aspirational projects, which we've seen some of this fall in areas of affordable housing, economic development, youth development, infrastructure reinvestment, et cetera. And the main goal is to support the city in its execution of the Imagine Kalamazoo 2025 plan. You'll see here on the website, this is lined up right at the top so people can get very well oriented very quickly. They can also peruse news, and there's a whole list of news articles and items we put up there, and again, resources that they can quickly link to there. It's important to just also say the background of FFE, how it works is really simple. There's a kind of a three-step process. People can make a donation of any size to the FFE endowment. That endowment is invested and returns dividends on the investment. And then every year a grant is made to the city in order to execute the projects in those three areas we talked about for tax reduction, budget stabilization, and aspirational projects. We've got this little graphic here just to kind of show people how the Imagine Kalamazoo vision connects with the endowment itself. And what that has meant to date for the residents of Kalamazoo is nearly $150 million invested from 2017 to 2022. So you can see that we've had $74 million of tax savings, and so that's paid to the city so that the city can lower the taxes and pass that savings on to all of our taxpayers. That's $53 million of community projects and about $20.5 million of stabilization of the city's budget. So here's a good time. I'll click through to the investment map. And you've seen this before, but it bears repeating because we update this every year and it gives people a granular look at where we're investing dollars. Again, this is kind of a presentation of data that we don't really see other foundations doing. So a dollar for dollar presentation of information by neighborhood, by goal, by year, and then even just as a list of projects. So again, if you're at home, you can do this on the website, you can do this on your smartphone. I'll click on aspirational projects here just to orient people again, but you can see that we've got the years of investment, we've got the neighborhoods of investment, we've got goals from the Imagine Kalamazoo plan, and then there's a list here on the right side. So these are totals that do not include this year yet. These will be published in December along with the newsletter. And if you click on a neighborhood, for example, Northside, it will show you total to date aspirational projects that have been invested. So, for example, $1.19 million in affordable housing. So in December, we'll publish the update to this and make it clear that the community can go back and see 2022 numbers involved. So since 2017, $11 million has been invested in more than 500 small businesses and entrepreneurs through the Small Business Grants and Loans programs in partnership with United Way. It's also been invested in improving commercial real estate to attract and retain businesses, and for an array of technical assistance and certification processes that benefit entrepreneurs. As we learned from the United Way presentation with community planning and economic development earlier this fall, there's a very strong focus on women-owned and minority-owned businesses in Kalamazoo, and that really comes through in the demographic data that we publish. Just this evening, we learned about some of the $12 million that's been spent on infrastructure since 2017. This includes replacing non-copper water services, so more commonly called lead water replacements, repairing and building sidewalks for those particularly who walk and use public transit to fulfill their daily needs, everything from school to shopping to supporting family. It's been spent on calming traffic for safer neighborhoods and for planting trees. And my count right now is approximately 1,000 trees since we started. Again, to your point about sidewalks, Mayor Anderson, I believe there was 0 or next to 0 budgeted for tree planting prior to the foundation. All-time youth attendance now exceeds 1,000 just in these past few years. So that's to Super Rec, All Things Possible, the YOU My City Job Preparedness Program. That's a very impressive number through our Parks and Recreation Department. And that doesn't even include the 1,000 Wi-Fi hotspots that we made available in partnership with Kalamazoo Public Library and up during COVID to make at-home learning possible. Nor does it include the 180,000 free trips that high schoolers have taken through the Youth Mobility Fund in the last several years. So 180,000 free trips have been taken with CCTA Metro because of that program. And lastly, as you learned in the last meeting, 380 units of affordable housing have been either built or brought up to a standard where they meet community needs as affordable housing since 2019. And before that, very little was done on this scale in affordable housing in Kalamazoo for building new houses, single-family houses, infill, things like that. So again, very much to the credit of the investments that have been made possible through our departments. So in summary, and this was a quote that was picked up by MLive, so I'll repeat it because it's obviously a winner, was that because of the Foundation for Excellence, we're able to promise the community that tomorrow is going to be better than today, and that they're not alone in investing their time, treasure, and talent in the city, because with $150 million invested to date, we're really involved, we're really invested in making tomorrow better for Kalamazoo. So even with these historical investments, there really is no end in sight for many of the opportunities to improve our city for the lives of everyone, which brings me to the 2023 budget. So I'll click back here to the main website and scroll to the document library. So under budgets, you can see any drafts that we've had in the past. I'm going to click on this transmittal memo and I'll zoom in. So as background, the way this budget is generated is through the city's special request process. And that process functions internally a bit like a grant process would. So departments propose new projects and programs. Those are then reviewed with standard criteria by a diverse team of city staff. And then those rank ordered projects are also looked at from a balancing standpoint to make sure that are all represented in the budget. After that, the draft FFE portion of the budget is presented to the Finance Committee and the full board of the Foundation for Excellence, and those are at public meetings. Those happened in September and will happen again next Monday, October the 24th at our board meeting. And that then has the recommendation from the board to the City Commission for inclusion in the annual budget, at which point it's all passed together by yourselves in January. So the proposed 2023 draft budget is $23.9 million, which includes $4.5 million to stabilize the city's budget, $14 million to lower property taxes for all taxpayers, and nearly $5.4 million for aspirational projects and operations. I'm going to scroll down here to the table itself. Again, this is online and public for anyone to peruse, and these pages are followed by description of the projects as well. In total, the draft 23 budget recommends that the City Commission continues unprecedented investments that we've seen since 2017 in Kalamazoo's youth, small businesses and entrepreneurs, and the substance of our neighborhoods. So trees, sidewalks, the things that really make us inviting to live in and do business in. And in conjunction with American Rescue Plan Act resources, we call them ARPA resources, 2023 will also see a continuation of these major investments in affordable housing. So in closing, I want to just thank a few groups that make all this work possible. And there's far too many people to name, including many of our partners. We've invited as many as we could really find time for this fall to present. And I apologize for those that are really dedicating their time and own treasure and talent from their organizations alongside us. But I'd like to thank city staff. There's over 650 city staffers who are doing this work. You've met a few of them, and we're out there really tirelessly day in and day out doing it. Program partners, United Way is a major partner. I already mentioned Kalamazoo Public Library, Kalamazoo Public Schools, Kalamazoo Youth Network, KidNet by short. These have all been really crucial partners to make this work possible in Kalamazoo. My 16-member board, I've brought this up as well again because I think it's just important for people to see that these are it's people from the community, people from neighborhoods, people from organizations that are out there serving the community every day. And they rotate very frequently, so there are always opportunities pretty much every year where there's a vacancy for somebody to get involved. And I know that that's a great way to start in public service in Kalamazoo and a great way to have your voice heard. And lastly, our donors. So we received the now quite significant and well-known $400 million commitment to the endowment. We'll be receiving that over 10 years in increments of $40 million. That's the bulk of what's going to make up the endowment, but we welcome donations of all sizes from any number of community members, and each donation makes a huge difference to the hopefulness that we all have that we're, investing in a model that works and helps support Kalamazoo in perpetuity. So really all into the future of all of our lives and careers. And then lastly, thank you for your time and attention this evening. It's been 6 presentations, and I hope it's been fruitful. Comments are always welcome, how we can, convey information to you and inform the community better each year, each time. We would expect to do this next year as well, just to keep this cycle of information and engagement active with you all and with the public. And with that, I will click back to the top level of the website. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Are there questions from the commission? Vice Mayor Cooney.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve, you said that it's $23.9 million this year, right?
Correct, Vice Mayor.
And $4 million of that is to make up for the tax cuts, or is it $14 million to make up for the lowering of the taxes?
$14 million is for the tax.
$4 million, okay.
And $4.5 million is for the budget stabilization.
Okay, thanks. And my question is any of the money going to Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo?
So we can see in the budget historically that the Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo, SPK for short, High Impact Fund, has received, and this would be bundled together with a small donation to the Disaster Relief Fund at the beginning of COVID, but $2.7 million is the total line. This year, no additional resources were requested.
None were requested?
That's correct, Vice Mayor.
Who requests them?
All staff are available to request with department approval through their supervisors, so that would have come from SPK Coordinator Ford and Community Planning and Economic Development. It's my understanding that they're in a planning phase. I know not the whole story, but it's my understanding that was the reason for not requesting this year.
Okay. My other question is, in the summer employment, is there any other money going, maybe city manager can answer that, is there any other money besides what Foundation for Excellence is putting into summer employment for kids? Do we put anything in the general budget for summer employment?
I don't believe so. I think it's all
So that's the whole
funded through here.
thing?
Yeah.
And how much is in there for that, Steve?
So, and just to be clear, so there's a program called YLU My City.
Yep.
And that's run by KRISA, and our contract with them each year is $825,000. And so that's one program. Whether or not there may be other things outside of that, in agreement with City Manager Ritzman, I don't believe that we have other programs.
So we're putting $825,000 into summer employment for youth. If that's not enough, can every kid wants a job get a job in the summer from us?
I'm not able to answer that, Vice Mayor. I don't know what the answer to that would be.
We can find that out. I'm not sure.
Okay, I'd like to find that out. I'm interested, because that was kind of the goal, that every kid could get a job that wanted a job in the city. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. Commissioner Prater?
I was just wondering, and this might be just a rough estimate, but, well, first I want to back up. Thank you so much for your presentation and all the work that you're doing. I'm always incredibly impressed by your level of professionalism and preparedness, both with FFE board, but with us as well. So my question is for roughly the fiscal year 22 budget versus the fiscal year 23 budget, how different do each of those three elements look between those budgets? So, like, I guess my question is the budget recommendation is $23.8 million for fiscal year 23, you're just curious, specifically fiscal year '22, but then with budget stabilization specific, aspirational.
Yeah, while I'm talking, I'm going to actually pull up, this is a good thing about the website, is I can just bring up the other one.
It's very user-friendly.
2021. In short, the tax stabilization it's inflated. Well, let me go back. The budget stabilization is inflated based on a factor that's developed by using one of two methods. There's a rubric essentially that comes through what's called a market basket of goods, and that's like a municipal inflation that we can use just as a percentage. So past year times of this inflation factor equals current. For tax, that's an estimate based on the actual assessed value of the taxable real estate and personal piece of that. And that's in the transmittal memo, which...
Is that fiscal year '21? There you go. Oh, that's 22.
Yeah, so here's proposed 23. I'll skip showing you the old budget. I think that might not work, but...
I'm most interested in the aspirational funding component, is how it relates between 22 and 23.
Yeah. So the main differences would be in projects that we had historically funded, but that can be covered by the American Rescue Plan Act dollars. And this goes back to the presentation that I made in, I believe it was July, talking about our role as an FFE of protecting the endowment invested assets. And so the dollars that we were able to bring in from ARPA for projects that had been historically FFE funded and then also scored highly in the special request process of the city, that helps us ensure that we're not digging overly deep at this very early phase into the endowment. So broadly speaking, they're very similar. A lot of the projects are going to be familiar, especially in youth, affordable housing, economic development, things like that.
Kind of taking away the ARPA component, sorry, not to be difficult, but like taking away like the ARPA component, if you're just comparing like apples and apples, like FFE, how much the budget recommendation was in fiscal year 22 from FFE versus fiscal year 23 from ARPA, like what would you say? Because I know the 2023 one is 3.87 million.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know roughly what it was in fiscal year 22?
I think it's about 60% of what it was last year.
You could if you want to pull up the 21 budget.
And I know it's okay if it's just a rough, even if you're roughly 60%, that's helpful.
So including personnel, yeah, out the door last year was 8.6, and this year out the door is 5.3, 5.4. Yeah.
And you probably know where I'm going with this. I kind of shared this. I said I apologize. You probably know where I'm going with this. I spoke with Jim a little bit about it during our one-on-one. And I shared this, I think, when you presented in July again. My reservation is that, I really tried to do a decent job of kind of like studying the spirit of ARPA. When you look at ARPA, to me, like if you could summarize like the intent of ARPA is action. Inject money into our local municipalities and states as quickly as possible to try to help the people who are most disproportionately distressed and hit hard by the pandemic, but just life in general. And just to kind of give you a snippet of like how I feel that way is, based on what the states received was largely based on the formula of unemployment. So to me, it's like, well, if you're saying you're prioritizing unemployment, that tells me like, hey, you're trying to help people who are out of work that need help. So the response to those people wouldn't be to say, like, let's put it aside and like make some money down the road. It's like, let's get these people back to work, right? So that's one indicator to me that tells me that the ARPA intent was action. The second one is when you look at the actual amount allocated to local municipalities out of the $350 million that was allocated for specifically formula-based for local municipalities, it's based on a formula divided between jurisdictions based on communities, predominantly communities that are CDBG entitlement jurisdictions. So entitlement jurisdictions, again, meaning some of the most distressed communities in the country, which to me, again, if the intent was, let's hold off, let's, not act quickly or whatever, like that doesn't equate to me, what feels like the intent of ARPA is. We, as a city of Kalamazoo, you know this better than anybody, we have a competitive advantage because of this gift of FFE, more than any other comparable community, probably in the country, but certainly in our region. And by us taking, even if it's a 40%, portion that we normally would have spent from aspirational funding for FFE, and using ARPA now means that we are that slightly less of, being able to be one step against other comparable urban core communities that are distressed or having challenges. I'll go back to this again. If ARPA had not happened, if the pandemic had not happened, would we have dinged aspirational funding by 40% from FFE? And again, if we wait and use ARPA in lieu of FFE, an entire childhood length of time will have elapsed. So those priority-based uses, the action, so to speak, that I believe that ARPA was intended for, is lost. And I don't think there's a better time to, double down our efforts, if you will. I recognize, I guess my next question is that if you knew how much FFE had taken a ding, I guess in 2022, I'd imagine it's probably pretty significant. Like anybody who's invested or has a retirement or depends on investments. So that does mean that we as a community have to make a decision, if we take out the full amount that we've been taking every single year, we're taking a bigger chunk of that pie, which means, there's, that possibility that there's less there in the future. But again, it's a question of there's no more pressing time than the present. And we already know where our community is hurting with 30% of people who are living, at or below the poverty level. And you compound and exacerbate that by factors we don't even know that COVID has caused in our community. I just, just my 2 cents on that, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that at all.
I do, and I'll keep them brief and try to summarize it at the top level, is part and parcel with receiving ARPA is an awareness of the fear that there was existential damage done to the economy of the United States, especially our cities, our states, and making sure that we prop those up and we were able to then pass on the ability for recovery to individuals, families, people. With that same market downturn, as you alluded, came enormous losses for any invested income that was exposed to market conditions. And the FFE endowment was not spared that. So at a time when those two things are happening simultaneously, the ARPA, in a sense, allows for a certain level of added investment by the city of Kalamazoo to continue, which is still above the historical norm prior to FFE. There is then a decision to be made, and you've dug into that a little bit, of, as you said, double down. So do we keep the FFE investment as well as ARPA? Now, the challenge to that, I'd say there's two. One is that would pose a threat to the endowment because the more you remove now, the less you earn, and the less you earn on what you earn on what you earn, right? That's the power of compound interest. So the more we have invested now, the longer the better. The other piece of that is that the FFE board is responsible for choosing the disbursement to the city in that third category of aspirational funds. And they do that based on what's perceived as the sustainable level of the endowment. Now, it's tricky right now because we're still receiving these major structured gifts each year out through 2030. So it's going to be $40 million per year. And I'm not a finance expert, but I think it's uncontroversial to say this is, one of the most difficult market environments that any of us has ever been exposed to, or have our retirements exposed to, had our municipal finances exposed to. So when you put those together, I think that there's two things that come together. One is, we're doing more than we ever could have before. So what is the scale of that allows us to continue to do more for the people permanently? And I think we've struck that sweet spot. And I'll be clear is that that's going to have to be a sweet spot we strike in each of the next ARPA years. Because if we dig into the endowment at a time when it's losing money, we're then gambling on a market upturn that nobody can guarantee. So the City Commission has created a unique tool, which is the FFE. As you say, it's a competitive advantage. And that advantage can be lost. Right.
I guess,
It has to be managed prudently.
I guess like the thing is like, okay, so if the market's taken, say, a 20, 30% ding, there's a consistent gift coming to us for a 10-year period. So when we were receiving the gift, when the market was super high, there's less impact long-term. Whereas like if we're putting the $40 million when the market's low, it's a buyer's market, right? So, potentially there's greater impact than in that period where there's a downturn. So there's a lot of people in the city who are far smarter than me, namely a person sitting there in the corner who thinks through all these financial components. But it just seems to me like there is a tremendous opportunity for us in this moment to do something significant that, as much as the FFE fund makes a seismic snowball effect in the future, similarly actions that we place into our people will have a snowball effect for generations to come. And I'll leave it there. I don't know how other people feel about this, but and like I say, I'm not trying to beat you up at all, Steve, because I have a tremendous amount of respect for you and appreciate you. But I want to make sure that I vocalize that, because it's something that has weighed heavy on me the last few months as we've contemplated this moment. So thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Vice Mayor Cooney?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think, I totally agree with Commissioner Prado. I think this is a wonderful thing. The FFE is a wonderful thing. I was there at the table when this started, and there were three things that were going to be done with this. One was to balance the budget. One was to take care of lowering the taxes, and third was aspirational projects. And what was said at that time was, at the top of the list of aspirational projects was stopping intergenerational poverty. And it's disappointing to me that there's no money for SPK in there. And your interest, Steve, is good. I mean, it's fine, and you do a wonderful job. You want to stabilize the FFE for the long run. But what I hear Chris saying, and what I think, is that investing in people now is going to help them in the long run. And we got a lot of people hurting out there. And so I'm disappointed that there's not more allocated to look at that situation.
Commissioner Decker.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Appreciate all the information, especially when you talk about what the FFE has done for the city of Kalamazoo for now and also in perpetuity. But I do have to, agree with my commissioners here on the dais, Commissioner Prado and Vice Mayor Cooney. I haven't said that very often. Vice Mayor Cooney. And then again, it goes to something that you said, is that pass on recovery to our community. And I believe the ARPA funds is really there to pass on to our community and to make sure that we are reaching the individuals that have been impacted by unemployment. You talk about, if we take out funds, the more you move, the less you earn, but we also have to think about the individuals that are on unemployment and their unemployment's running out, the individuals that have had to take out their 401ks, IRAs, taking a 20% penalty, and they're trying to make it. So I think about that also because, I'm also in that position to have to do that. So I know how the market is. I know it's going up, it's going down. I agree with Commissioner Prado. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. we're not going to get these funds back probably ever again. We're not going to have these funds past the year of 2026, ARPA funds that is, if they're not used, they're going to go back to the government. But we are still going to have a 10-year of $40 million for the Foundation for Excellence of funds coming into the city. I kind of looked at that too, and I got to put my glasses back on to see. But I do believe that some of the funding, there's some areas on there that I do feel should have a little bit more funding, especially if we're thinking about, as Vice Mayor Cooney said, SBK. I know they're still working on some of their things, and hopefully that'll come to us before budget approval on there. And I definitely do want to see, there's great stuff on there. We've got the infrastructure, which you know we need. If you can scroll up and down for me, that'd be awesome, so I can see it. Thank you. We've got develop the ambassador program downtown. That is wonderful. That is an awesome program. Neighborhood engagement and activation, we don't have anything there. Park enhancements. If you're talking about really affecting people, the younger people within the youth, parks, that is a big thing. We have many, many parks here within the city of Kalamazoo that could use some upgrades, that could use some basketball hoops, that could use certain things for the kids to do, playscapes and whatnot. Affordable housing site acquisition. We've, since 2017, 2022, because that's the way that we have it broken down, yes, almost $10 million. That's a lot. That's a lot, and that helps with a lot of units that are now coming up and to be open within the city of Kalamazoo. If we're really going to be intentional, I'm using your word, intentional about housing, you know, that is also very important to us. And site acquisition for $250,000, there's a lot of sites that I feel that could be acquired. And if we have more funds within that budget for departments to go and say, hey, you have a project that you want to start tomorrow, I have the funds for it, versus, you know, having to wait. So I think I do have to agree with, again, Vice Mayor Cooney and Commissioner Pradel, that I am kind of also disappointed that some of these funds are not being funded. Some of these programs are not being funded this year. One that definitely sticks out to me, generational wealth building. There's nothing in there for the wealth building. And maybe these are the programs that just didn't work, and maybe that's why they're not funded. You know, I don't, maybe you and I can have a conversation about that. But I guess if we're thinking about building wealth, bringing people out of poverty, helping LMI and households, that's number one to me also, next to owning a home and understanding your financial place. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Yes, Commissioner Hoffman.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Manager Brown. And I agree with a lot that has been said, and we have to be realistic as a commission and state the obvious. We talk about this once in a lifetime pot of money, and yes, we can do really, really wonderful things. What I want us to remember is that the city doesn't do the work. It takes community partners to do that, and many of our nonprofit organizations are stretched so thin. So when we talk about doing this robust, aspirational project, right, we have to look back and see where is capacity, where do organizations have the capacity to do what we believe they should be doing. I would recommend for us to start doing a couple of more listening sessions before the end of the year and find out what does community want and what is their capacity. We have an opportunity to fill in some spaces, and I think we should consider that. You know, maybe we do both and, you know. So we have this once in a lifetime opportunity, which I don't know if it's once in a lifetime. And we also have to look at the ability to get the work done in a timely fashion. And is that even realistic of what we're thinking? So I just wanted us to kind of pause and really think about that. I think there's a way that we can do both.
Vice Mayor Cooney.
Yeah, I totally agree with those comments, and I think that what we should be doing with some of that money is investing in these organizations that you're talking about, that are doing great work in the community and need more help. And that's where I think a lot of this money should be spent, in investing in people like Cradle and people like Urban Alliance and these other people that are working so hard and really need the funds. And now we have some money that we could put in it. Early childhood development, childcare, those kinds of things. I think that's where that money should be. I don't think we should be starting new projects. I think we should be investing in the projects that are already going on and need our support and don't have the money.
Any other questions for our good FFE manager, Mr. Brown, at this point? Commissioner Bruno?
I mean, if there's less coming out of FFE, irregardless, my initial thought is that we need to stop sitting on a bunch of this ARPA funding. We need to get it out the door. And I'm not saying we just throw it out the door, out the door all at once, because there's a lot of organizations that we don't want to set up for failure with one and done funding. But, it drains me to just think that there's money sitting there when there are people who are hurting, who need our help and support out there in our community right now.
So, hey, I'm going to jump in here for a second. So we're mashing a lot of things together here, and so I just want to get some clarity for us here. Obviously, Mr. Brown does not make ARPA funding recommendations. So this was a FFE budget, just a reminder for all of it. So we've been kind of sliding back and forth between ARPA, FFE, maybe making some suggestions that sound like Mr. Brown could do something about spending ARPA money, which he can't. So I just want to make sure that that's clear for all of us and for the community that's listening. So that's that. And talking about ARPA, and I know the city manager and whoever else is here on the team is certainly listening to our comments about the American Rescue Plan Act dollars, which have to be spent effectively by the end of 26. We all know that. And I'm hoping that we are taking advantage of our one-on-one conversations and this budget building discussions we're having so that our administration, not Mr. Brown, who's making those ARPA spending decisions, is contemplating and including that in this budget that is coming our way on December 1st. And I see that that's happening, right, Manager Isma? Just that said, I think we just need a little clarification. I don't know if you have a brief clarification related to this as far as the Foundation for Excellence and the endowment and that sort of thing. Do you think there's anything helpful, Attorney Robinson?
Well, I would reiterate what Mr. Brown has said, that FFE board sits as the fiduciary over the funds that they have control over. The City Commission created the FFE, but the FFE is its own body. That said, the city and the FFE, if you will, are walking up the hill, hopefully hand in hand. That doesn't necessarily mean that you want to necessarily go the same direction all the time. There will be a little bit of conflict. And that said, FFE is be looking at, and there are, as indicated by Mr. Brown's remarks, there are three categories, or sometimes referred to as three buckets. The first two are must-gets, if you will, on the part of the city. Lowering the tax rate and getting the budget stabilization monies. Those are must. Our FFE board has to provide those funds to the city. Aspirational projects is discretionary. That is not a must. And the decision was made, as was indicated by Mr. Brown's remarks back in July, that if we can use ARPA money to offset some of the money that the FFE has, so that it will remain solvent in the year 2040, 2050. Because if we don't, and we're not, I mean, I wish I had a crystal ball and say, yeah, we're going to have a big market boom in the 2030s, and we don't have to worry about this. If I had the crystal ball, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now. Because I'd be telling you that I would have bet on the Phillies instead of the and the Padres instead of the Braves and the Dodgers. But that said, that's the FFE's goal. And I'll say this: there was at the most recent, and the city commission members who are at those meetings know that some FFE board members kind of cringe as to, wait a minute, how come the city commission has control over some of the things that we're going to do in terms of creating the executive director position? Why does the city commission have control over that? And I had to kind of give them the same explanation. You're walking up the hill hand in hand, and you got to try to walk together, but there will be some times when you maybe one wants to go this direction, one wants to go that direction, you're going to have to compromise. It's like the sack race when you're paired with somebody. So that's one thing I want you to be aware of. The other thing is, and we have to be kind of careful with this, when this money comes to the city from the FFE, it is public money. And under Michigan law, it has to be spent on an authorized public purpose. Just can't spend it on private, even though there may be some good things out there, you just can't give money to private organizations unless they're two things. It is a public purpose recognized by Michigan law, and you're getting a quid pro quo. That is, you're getting value for the money that you're giving to the organization. So with those caveats in place, I recognize it's a good discussion, but I also want to recognize some of the parameters that you're operating under.
Thank you, Chair Robinson. So at this point, I don't want to, if it's okay, not make it too close to our business meeting that starts at 7 to give us all an opportunity for whatever we need to do. So Manager Ritzma, any?
Yeah, just one final thought, and I agree with Clyde. The discussion is great. We've got a lot more, have many more opportunities for discussion. So we will work that in over the next couple months. What we're getting at is the crux of the decisions that have to be made and priorities. And, we had a retreat in February. So taking all of the commission priorities, imagine Kalamazoo, and putting them into a rubric that we can score and decide what's can be funded and what can't. That's a tricky process, and we're going to have to really work together on that over the next couple of months. So more to come.
Commissioner Prado?
Sure. All I know is that, our responsibility isn't the day-to-day management of the city. It's very complex. I know there's a ton to that and a lot of to balance. But there are some responsibilities we do have, which is budget setting, policy and strategic priorities, and our appointee oversight. And, we are here sharing our opinion about the direction of the budget, priority and strategic, and we're sharing that with our appointees. So, I'd rather save us from the grief of waiting until the 11th hour and then having it come to front than let's work together here now, early on, when we can actually do something and work together on it rather than run into the issue. All I'm trying to say, and I've been trying to say that since July, Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Prado. Unless there's something very, very pressing for this moment, then I'm going to say, appreciate the discussion. It's not the end of it, obviously. Thank you once again for your work.
Thank you,
I really appreciate the heck out of that. And also the work of the Foundation for Excellence Board. Keep that in mind. That board approved this proposal at a meeting, not totally dissimilar discussions, but that is the responsibility of that board, that FFE board, to make that allocation. So lots of folks working on this here. So at this point, we have a business meeting that is starting in a little less than 10 minutes, it looks like, and we will take that break and be back for our business meeting in a few moments. We are adjourned.